Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Farhin Binti Mohd Basir 256139, and I'm going to present about the criticism of Dworkin's right thesis. So here's the table of content, which include the background of the theory, the criticism of the theory, and example law and cases as an illustration for my answer. For the background, Professor Ronald Dworkin is an American legal philosopher who has drawn widespread and serious attention due to his right-based theory of law. The right thesis comes primarily as a rebuttal to the more widely held idea that judges in applying statutes do not always produce the effects intended by the legislators. A starting point of Dworkin's philosophy of law might be sensibly be regarded by some as an attack on Hart's model of rules. Hart, in the concept of law, uses the idea to support the notion that there can be gaps in the law, gaps which must be filled by the judge's own interpretation, which is one of the causes of imperfect judicial outcomes. However, Dworkin disagrees. His theory of the law as integrity instead poses the idea that there can exist no gaps in the law. These gaps are filled with legal principle. Instead, principle inherent to the morality of society. The right answer thesis comes as necessary consequence of this theory. If there can exist no gaps in the law, then provided enough time and deliberation, it is logical that a judge could appropriately apply the necessary principles to reach the correct conclusion. So, rights are trumps in Dworkin's theory, which means that if there is any right which comes into conflict with any policy, the right must prevail. For the criticisms to Dworkin's right thesis, the first one is no single test to determine what is right. So we may say that for Dworkin, people have a right to be treated with dignity. It is the importance of human dignity that justify the extraordinary moral force of rights, namely to block policies that might further the community's overall best interests. So Dworkin says that a right answer is one which produces a better fit with the existing law and legal practice. So as an example, suppose two judges are to decide whether Salma is entitled to inherit his dad's property. They may answer this question differently from each other and yet claim that each answer is the right answer. So how do we determine which one is the right and which other is wrong? For the second criticism is that judges have a weak discretion and they are to find the right answer from the principle is unsustainable. This is connected with the interpretation stage where judges have a very significant role in finding whether that law is right or not. To suggest that judges have discretion is not to imply that they have the license to do what they will. Judges are bound by the authority and they have their own oath, so their hands are pretty much tied. Judges are to decide based on the law presented before them. Unless there is no written rule provided, then the judge can have their own discretion. This criticism is not to undermine judges' knowledge because they are simply being trained to uphold law applicable before them. So if the judges simply exercise discretion and make new rules, they will be changing the rules of the game. So each time they make discretion, they also commit fraud on the litigants. For the second criticism is Hart says that Dworkin is a noble dreamer. Hart criticizes Dworkin's right answer thesis as flawed and vulnerable to criticisms. Hart described Dworkin as a noble dreamer. Peter Fitzpatrick also called Dworkin's strategy to give systematic unity to the legal system and legal practice myth-making. To his critics, Dworkin continues to build his myth and noble dream. According to the court, Dworkin's idea is particularly difficult to implement as opposed to conceptually and theoretically. For the last criticisms, Dworkin's right thesis is actually not a theory, it is merely a strategy to find the best answer. If we take a look at Dworkin's interpretation, it includes stage 1, 2, and 3, and also pre-interpretation, during interpretation, and post-interpretation. So based on that, they critique that Dworkin's practice is actually a strategy to find the best answer rather than introducing a new idea. He basically provides an outline on what is right and what is not. Therefore, the jurist critiques Dworkin for not giving a clear and consistent solution on how to find the right answer. I will be using European Court of Human Rights judgment in Stubbing versus Germany as a case that I will illustrate my answer. This case concerning incest. While incest is an activity which many people will ethically disapprove of quite strongly, it is not obvious whether its prohibition can be justified, given that the moralistic or paternalistic goal of stopping people from living ethically worthless life does not qualify as legitimate under Dworkin's principle of personal responsibility. The fact that Germany did not even try to rely on this reason is an indicator of the appeal of Dworkin's principle. which is banning an activity because of ethical disapproval, would widely be seen as simply unacceptable and unjustifiable intrusion into the personal life of the right holder. So, if we accept with Dworkin that rights are about dignity, and dignity is, among other things, are about treating people's life as equally important. So this means that the burdens and benefit must be distributed in just way, so that it would be seen to be followed. The scope of the rights becomes so broad as to cover the whole domain of justice. This would be problematic because it is so wide and, to my mind, correctly accepted that not every policy which is unjust also violates right. So I believe that there is indeed a structural weaknesses in Dworkin's writing about rights and human dignity because he doesn't address, let alone resolve.